أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين رحمة للعالمين بالقاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين أما بعد فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه المجيد وقوله الحق بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون صدق الله العلي العظيم. Mr. Clicker, you don't bring the clicker? Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Technology is sometimes baffling, isn't it? Can't always keep up with it. I've chosen to go on the podium simply because it's easier to work with a laptop and PowerPoint presentation. We are quite well aware of the lives of the Imams, their contributions, etc. But one thing that we are not aware is what happened after the Ghaibat as far as the leadership of the community is concerned. It's important to know our own history, not only because we get to know about the past, but it also tells us who we are as human beings, because who we are depends on our past. And in many ways, our own identity is shaped by what happened in the past. During the times of the Imams, they had disciples, thousands of them in fact. In fact, according to Shaykh al-Mufid, Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salam had over 4,000 disciples on his own. Now some of the disciples were also the companions of Imam al-Baqir. Some of them ended up also being the companions of Imam Musa al-Kadhim. But there were many of them, and many of these disciples, they wrote books based on the teachings of the Imams. Most of these books have been destroyed, but we do have some of them. In fact, some of them were actually notebooks taken by these disciples, people like Zurara, Muhammad bin Muslim, Al-Ahwal, Hisham ibn Hakam, and many others. They are called 400 usul arbamiyah. These were actually taken directly, written from the Imams. We have some of these usuls left, but not all of them. But it's important for us to know, because sometimes people ask, how do we know what the Imam said? The Imam, let us be clear that during the times of the Imam, up to Imam Musa al-Kadhim, the center of Shia activities was not Medina. It was actually Kufa. Today, if you go to Kufa, there is very little of our history of the disciples of the Imams left. We don't even know where they are buried. But actually, most of the intellectual activities up to the time of Imam Musa al-Kadhim occurred in Kufa. The disciples would travel from Kufa to Medina to learn from the Imams and then to spread their teachings in Kufa. The Ghaibat itself occurred around 870, 874 to be exact, Ghaibat al-Sughra. And then the year 940, Ghaibat al-Kubra started. But obviously when the Imam is not present, there is a vacuum in the leadership in terms of communication. As we are aware, the Imam, our 12th Imam, had four main agents during Ghaibat al-Sughra. But these agents were not scholars. They were administrators. We did not have any books or major books written by them. There were others who were working with them or besides them who were actually scholars. One of them that you may have heard his name of many a time is Kulaini. Kulaini actually wrote during the time of Ghaibat al-Sughra. As I said, Ghaibat al-Kubra started in the year 940. And he, that is Kulaini, died in 939. And one of the most famous books that we have is, the first major book is his Al-Kafi fi Ilm al-Din. Al-Kafi meaning that which is sufficient for you in the knowledge of religion. Kulaini himself originated in Rai, which is on the outskirts of Tehran. And perhaps we never quite appreciate the efforts that these ulama took to transmit the teachings, record the teachings, and write. He traveled for 20 years. That Kulaini's book, which has 16,000 hadiths, by the way, when you compare all the books that the Ahlul Sunnah have, they do not amount to the 16,000 hadith. that Kulaini has. And his Kafi is divided into 3 sections. That is the Furu, and of course the Rawdatul Kafi and Usul al-Kafi. So you can imagine the work that he put in. And for some of us who go for ziyarat, we normally just go to Kadhmain. But the Nawab, the agents of the 12th Imam, Kulaini, Sharif al-Murtaza, and many others are buried actually in Baghdad itself. So if you spend time in Baghdad, make sure you go to their mazar also. The year 945 was a pivotal year for the Shias. In fact, from 945 till 1055 is called the Shia century. Primarily because the main dynasty at that time was the Buyid or Buwayhid also, and they were very much pro-Shia. And in fact, the center of Shia activities moved from Kufa to Baghdad. And therefore, we find that the flourishing of Shia activities now in Baghdad. And why it was called the Shia century? Because not only were the Buyids ruling over Iraq and Iran, the Hamadanis were also Shias in Syria, and the Fatimids. Fatimids were not 12 Shias. These were the Ismailis. They ruled in Egypt, in Cairo primarily. So because of this is called the Shia century. Why was it so important for us? Apart from the role of the scholars that I will describe, we were able to actually mark our activities in public. For the first time, Ashura was actually marked and commemorated in public. Ghadir was marked in public. The ulama did not have to write in taqiyya or fear for their lives. And initially, there were different kinds of ulama. There were those who depended mainly on hadith, on traditions, but there were others who depended on reasoning, as we shall see. Importantly also, because Kufa was the center of the activities, most of the hadiths actually originated or were spread in Kufa. But later on, some of the ulama also went to Qom. And therefore, one of the major scholars that Kulaini depends on is Ali ibn Ibrahim. But Ali's father, Ibrahim bin Hashim, he actually spread the hadith of Kufa to Qom itself. One of the greatest scholars, and I think it's important that we know at least something about these scholars, not necessarily in details, but who they were and what was their contribution, was a person by the name of Ibn Babawayh, commonly known as Sheikh al-Saduq. He died around 50 years after Ghaibat al-Sughra started. He was the teacher of Sheikh al-Mufid and a teacher of many others. He, by the way, died near Qom. He's buried near Qom also. His father lived during Ghaibat al-Sughra, and the father wanted sons. So he prayed and wrote a letter to Imam Sahib al-Zaman alayhi salam. That the Imam should pray that a son comes to him. And the Imam responded to him that we have prayed for you and you will get not one but 3 sons. So Sheikh Saduq himself used to take pride in the fact that he says, I was born by the dua of Imam Sahib al-Zaman alayhi salam. These ulama wrote a lot, sometimes 300, 400, 500 books. You know, I write a few books and I think, alhamdulillah, I've done a great job. But, you know, they wrote copiously. Allama Majlisi, for example, who, if we have time, we'll get to, himself is credited with 110 volumes of just one book, Biharul Anwar. Mainly a collection of traditions, but you can imagine, I pity his wife though. He didn't have much time for the family. But 110 volumes, although the students also helped them in this. But it was primarily the efforts of these scholars. One of the books that Sheikh Saduq wrote was Kamaluddin wa Itmam al-Ni'mah, the perfection of religion and the completion of the favors. This book now is written in English. It is translated in English. And why do I mention this in particular? Because he stated when he was in Nishapur, you know where Nishapur is, right? Near Kadamgah, not too far from Mashhad. That when he passed it, the Shias were confused. We're talking of the time when the Ghaibat Kubra had just started. People started asking, where is this Imam now? How do we know he's going to come back? So he wrote this book. It's about 600 pages, but it's available in English, it may be online too. And he says in this he collected traditions of why the Imam went in Ghaiba, the alamat al-zuhur, that is the signs of the appearance, and what will happen after the Imam comes back. In addition, there was another scholar at this time, Ibn Qawlaway. You may have seen his book, it's also in English now, Kamilul Ziyarat. For those who go to Kazimain, if you recall Babul Murad, when you enter the main gate, unfortunately the ladies enter through a different gate, so they cannot have access to this. But before you enter the shrine of Imam Musa al-Kadhim, you will see on your right a particular kind of encavement. Sheikh Mufid and Ibn Qawlaway are buried there. So we recite Fatiha normally when you go there. Ibn Qawlaway was also a contemporary with Sheikh al-Mufid. Sheikh al-Mufid, Sharif Murtaza, and Sheikh al-Tusi died around the same time in the 11th century. But the ulama also realized, because most of the time before this, it was done through traditions. You argue through traditions. But when you are arguing or discussing with people who do not share those traditions, Ahlul Sunnah, who do not accept your traditions, you have to go through another way of argumentation. And this was through reasoning. That doesn't mean that they abandoned tradition, but they complemented hadith with aql at the same time. They were living in Baghdad, as I mentioned, under a primarily Sunni environment. And they had to debate, if you may have heard the terms of Ash'aris and Mu'tazilis and other scholars, primarily non-Shi'as, but they did it through reasoning. One of the stories that is told about Sheikh al-Mufid, an incredible story, is that one night when he was sleeping, he dreamt that Hazrat Fatima alayha salam came to him holding Imam al-Hassan and Imam al-Hussein. Teach my children. He woke up, he says, oh my God, how can I be a teacher to them? And the next day when he went to his madrasa, which was next to his home, he saw a lady walk in with two children. Teach my children. These were also Sayyid, Sharif al-Murtada and Sharif al-Radi. Sharif al-Radi, by the way, was the compiler of Nahjul Balagha. And Sharif al-Murtada became a student and took over from Sheikh al-Mufid. And as I said, they started discussing and arguing based on reason. So the questions that were arisen, the reason for the ghaiba was because of the dangers to the life of the Imams, or not accepting the allegiance, bay'ah from unjust rulers, but that the Imam was always there behind the cloud, just like the sun under the clouds. And many times people ask, what is the point of having an Imam who we cannot access? Some of you may be lucky enough to be from Zanzibar, huh? Lucky enough, heaven on earth. But I don't wish to personalize this, but it's a story which is very common for those who come from Zanzibar. Malim Mia, you remember him, some of you? He was my uncle, and he told me this, and it's a common story, that he had a particular habit. He was a very pious man. His habit was that on the day of Ashur, he had to be in Karbala. One particular year, he was in Uganda, in Kampala. And as you know, there's no airport in Kampala. You have to drive to Entebbe. And while he was going to the airport, the car got a puncture. By the time he arrived at the airport, the aircraft was about to leave. And he told me this, and he's told many people, that whenever you need the Imam, recite the Istighatha of Imam Sahib al-Zaman. That Istighatha, by the way, is available in Mafatihul Jinan. And basically, Istighatha, as we know, means to seek the help through the mediation of the Imam, but seeking Allah's help. And my uncle, he recited this Istighatha, and guess what? The plane was taxiing to take off, and it developed technical problems. It came back, and he got onto the flight. This shows that the Imam works in different ways. I can guarantee you that it has impacted me personally too. The next major scholar that we need to discuss, also the student of Sheikh al-Mufid, was Sheikh al-Tusi. So great was his role that he's also called Sheikh al-Ta'ifa, the Sheikh of the whole community. He, in my opinion, was the greatest scholar that we have ever produced. because he wrote in almost every field that you can think of, whether it was fiqh, usul, kalam, rijal, etc. It is said that one of his greatest books, early books that he wrote, was Kitabun Nihaya. It's available also in English. Amazing the number of books now, alhamdulillah, that we have in English. It's a fiqh book. But people were doubting the authenticity or reliability of Kitabun Nihaya. So a couple of his colleagues who were actually doubting this book, they went and slept at the dhari of Imam Ali alayhi salam. And the Imam came to their dreams, said, do not doubt. This is a story that is told. They do not doubt Kitabun Nihaya. Great effort has been put in it. So these two people then came to Sheikh Tusi in the morning to confirm that this book of yours is reliable. But before they could say anything, Sheikh Tusi told them, did I not tell you not to doubt my book? The Imam who came to you also came to me at night. And he confirmed it. So Sheikh Tusi, as I said, lived in Baghdad, in the area of Karkh, by the way. If you go to Baghdad, the Karkh area is still available today. And during the last 10 years or so of his life, the Buyid Empire ended. The Seljuks who started taking over. One of the Seljuk kings, by the way, was Salahuddin. You heard of the Salahuddin? Saladin. He is much celebrated in the West. Many Muslims also think he's a great hero. By the way, he was a killer of the Shias. So, you have to be careful of that. He was very much oppressing the Shias. He's buried in Damascus. In any case then, there were riots against the Shias by the Hanbalis at that time. And his house, Sheikh Tusi's house in Karkh, was looted. Notebooks and his whole library was burnt. When we say that a lot of our books are no longer present, this is one of the reasons. That because the whole libraries were burnt, and it was Sheikh Tusi who moved to a place called Ghari, now it's called Najaf. And he said that it is from the door of knowledge that we will seek knowledge. Because the Imam Ali alayhi salam is Babul Ilm, Madinatul Ilm, wa Aliyun Babuha. It is from the door of knowledge that we shall seek knowledge. Ghari at that time was a small little place, not like what we see now. But you can see how Sheikh Tusi developed the Hawza. This was the kind of if you like, the seeding place, the place where it all started. By Sheikh Tusi. Sheikh Tusi died in 1067. So you can imagine how long it has continued for. Although it wasn't as active in the medieval age as it is now. For those who want to know, and I always believe that when we go for ziyarat, not only we go to the haram, but if we can go to those ulama who played such a pivotal role in our history. If you go from Babu Tus, one of the doors in Najaf, if you recall, is Babu Tus. There's Babu al-Qibla, there's Babu Muslim bin Aqil, and also Babu Tusi. That door, if you come out leading toward Wadi Salam, on the left side there is called Masjid al-Tus. That's where Sheikh Tusi is buried. Should go there and at least recite Fatiha for him. He started going beyond just the traditions and exploring certain amount of ijtihad. The year 1258 was another important year because this was the coming of the Mongols. Have you heard of the Mongols? Believe it or not, they came from Mongolia. That's why they were called Mongols. In any case then, they looted, rampaged, burnt, ransacked Baghdad and a lot of the Islamic cities. Thousands, if not billions of people were killed at that time. Around the same time, there was another school which grew up. This was in Hilla. I do not know how many of you remember it, but when you travel between Najaf and Baghdad, not through the road of Karbala, but you pass through Hilla. Hilla is also very close to Karbala itself. And this is where a lot of our ulama also emerged from. You may have heard of Allama Hilli. Before him was his uncle, Muhaqqiq al-Hilli. And after him was another Hilli called Ibn Idris al-Hilli, and many other Hillis. It is with Allama Hilli, who died in the year 1325, that we find that the principles of ijtihad were elaborated. Before them, it was in a very preliminary stages. I do not have the time to go into the details, but before this time, many a times, especially by the Sunnis, ijtihad meant qiyas, analogy, or using our own opinion. For us, no, ijtihad has to be grounded in the texts, not just haphazard reasoning. And therefore, today, you'll find that we are the only ones who have mujtahids. Ahlus Sunnah have muftis, but they don't have mujtahids, because our ijtihad is firmly grounded now in the text itself. Allama Hilli wrote as many as 500 books. Some of these, a lot of these are available today. And by the way, one book can have 10 volumes. So in these 500 books, some of these books had, one book could be 10, 15 volumes itself. I mean, just to give you an example, a lot of us have heard of Al-Mizan fi Tafsir al-Quran, right? By Allama Tabatabai. We only hear of Al-Mizan, but that Mizan has 20 volumes itself. And each volume is about 400 pages. So that gives you the scope of the writing that we have. So without going into great details, Allama himself used the Quran and Hadith to derive laws using various principles like Is'alatul Bara'a, Istishab, deriving from the Hadith, but then amplifying them and increasing the scope of derivation or inferring rules and shifts from the Quran itself. One of the great anecdote that is told of Allama Hilli, which I would like to share with you. At that time, there was one of these Mongol kings called Olyetu. Olyetu died in 1316, about 9 years before Allama Hilli. Olyetu, these Mongols, by the way, were not Muslims initially. They converted to Islam later on. Olyetu had a bit of a problem. He was a Sunni, and don't ever think of doing this. But in anger, he divorced his wife. Talak, talak, talak. Khalas, kusha mambo, makwisha. And then, of course, he came to his senses. Oh my God, what have I done? So he asked the ulama there, the Sunni ulama. They said, well, talak is talak. She now has to marry somebody else, consummate that marriage, sleep with him, and that other person has to divorce her. Then she can come back to you. So how can I divorce, let my wife be with somebody else? So they all said we couldn't do anything, but there is a scholar in Hilla who is well known. Maybe we can ask him. So they asked Allama Hilli to come in. And in those days, you know, you would bow down before the king. Allama did not do that. They asked him, why don't you? He says, we only bow down in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The other thing was he took his slippers, champal, you know. Now don't do that here, otherwise the mukhi will be very unhappy. He put it under his shoulder, under his armpits, excuse me. And they said, why are you bringing the slippers here? We leave them outside. He says, well, because there are some Hanafis here, and they used to steal slippers in the time of the Prophet. And I like these slippers. The Hanafis said, but we were not even there during the time of the Prophet. How can you say that? He said, no, I'm sorry. The Shafis were there. The Shafis stood there. We were not there. Maybe the Malikis were there. The Malikis said, we were not there at all. The Hanbalis must have been there. The Hanbalis said, we were the last ones to come. The last one. So we couldn't be there. Allama said, point proven. We follow the fatwas and the ijtihad of Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. So what is your problem? The king explained his problem and said, look, this talaq is called talaqul bid'ah. It was actually introduced by the second caliph. It is actually, your marriage is perfectly okay. And he converted to Shia Islam, King Olyetu, and he came to be called Khuda Banda. At that time, then Shia Islam, at least in this part of the world, started flourishing again. The coins of the were minted with the names of the Imams and Aliyun Waliullah. Allama Hilli himself wrote and refuted someone as famous amongst Ahlus Sunnah as Ibn Taymiyyah. Later on we find another school established. You can see now how our ulama were not concentrated in one particular area. They were in different areas. We've talked about, for example, Baghdad. We've talked of Najaf. We've talked of Hilla, and now Jabal Amil, which actually is in what we contemporarily call in Lebanon. Muhammad bin Makki al-Amili, also known as Shahid al-Awwal. He died when he was only 51 years old. But again, they had a lot of pressure on them. These ulama of ours performed splendidly under great and very difficult conditions. He moved around, studied a lot, including Makkah, Medina, and so on. But you know, when you are in the minority, you have to know the majority well, because you are under continuous pressure. So a lot of our ulama studied and were more competent in Sunni fiqh than the Sunnis themselves. They knew their books inside out. So Shahidul Awwal was one of them. He studied and taught Sunni fiqh, and many a time they would teach Shia books in an underground room between Maghrib and Isha prayers. He wrote a book, reportedly when he was in prison, Lum'at Dimashqiyah. Lum'at Dimashqiyah, by the way, one of the most important books that is taught in the Hawza until today is Lum'at Dimashqiyah, the Lightnings of Damascus. As I say, it's taught in the Hawza until today. Because of his Shia beliefs, he was imprisoned in Damascus and even executed at the age of 51. He was accused of being a Nusayri, which he certainly was not, that he endorsed wine and so on. It's perhaps sad and ironic that Maliki and Shafi jurists, scholars, fuqaha, gave a fatwa against him. And another scholar that I wish to study, we don't have much time, was Shahidul Thani, Zainul Abidin, or Zainuddin. Again, he was also executed in Constantinople. He lived in the 16th century. And again, the charges against him were what? That he was a Rafidi. Rafidi, we were called Rafidis by Sunnis primarily, that we were rejectors and so on. He, that is Shahidul Thani, wrote a commentary, Sharhu Lum'ah. And again, this is one of the main textbooks that we read until today. Lum'ah on top and Sharh al-Lum'ah, the commentary by Shahidul Thani on Shahidul Awwal. What Shahidul Awwal wrote, Shahidul Thani was commenting and also amplifying it. Shahidul Thani himself mastered and again taught Sunni fiqh, and to the extent that he got ijazah not only from our scholars, but even from Sunni scholars. And you have to be completely competent in order to get that. Again, he often pretended, or he had to practice taqiyya and had to pretend to be a Shafi'i for the sake of survival. And the reason why he chose Shafi'i was because on many points, not all points, it is the closest to us. Again, he was accused of being a heretic, that is mulhid, one who had deviated from Islam. And the Turkish, the king at that time, Kanuni, summoned him to Turkey and had him executed. I have to end now because my time is running out. But one thing that I do need to make clear, because this is a point that many of us do not know, and certainly non-Shias, sometimes non-Muslims or Sunnis, accuse us that Shiism started in Iran. And actually, Iran only became completely Shia in the year 1501. Imagine that. Before that, yes, there were Shias in some parts of Iran, in Khorasan, for example, in Qum, in Ray. But the majority of Iran was actually Sunni. It was only because the coming of Shah, another Shah, Shah Ismail, in the year 1501, he died in 1524. In 1501, he was crowned as the first king of a new dynasty in Tabriz. And this was called the Safavid dynasty. Sallu ala Muhammad wa alayhi. I wanted to spend just a few minutes to recite about Karbala itself, because this is a night of the Thursday night. We want to remember Imam Hussein. We've talked about the ulama and the great sacrifices, but no sacrifice can be as great as the sacrifice of Sayyid al-Shuhada. And what can be more traumatic? You know, it is impossible to imagine the traumas that Imam Hussein faced, not only on the day of Ashur, but even before the day of Ashur. But can you imagine a father going to collect the body of his son, Kari al-Jawan as we call it, a young son, bringing the body back to the tent? And can you imagine the trauma of a father who has to carry the body of a 6-month-old baby back to the tent? And at the last moment, he comes to his son, Imam Zainul Abidin. Imam is actually unconscious. Bibi Zainab wakes him up. Says, wake up. Your father has come to you. What does Imam Hussain do? You know, at this point, look at his complete submission to the will of Allah. He takes the hand of Imam Zainul Abidin and presses it against his own chest and says, my son, I'm going to teach you a dua. Remember this dua, because this dua does not come from me. It came from my father, who got it from the Prophet of Allah himself. What was the dua? He says, whenever you have problems, recite this dua. بِحَقِّ يَاسِينَ وَالْقُرْآنِ الْحَكِيمِ. I ask, O Ya Allah, by the haqq of Yasin and the Quran, وَبِحَقِّ طَاهَا وَالْقُرْآنِ الْعَظِيمِ. I ask you by Taha, which is one of the names of also the Prophet himself. يَا مَنْ يَقْدِرُ عَلَى الْحَوَاجِ الصَّائِلِينَ. O one who fulfills of those who ask of you. Ya man ya'lamu ma fi dhamir, or one who knows what is in the minds of people. Ya munafis anil makrubin, or one who relieves those who are suffering. Ya mufarjun lil maghmumin, or one who relieves the stresses of those who are under stress. Ya rahim al-shaykh al-kabir, or one who is rahim, who is merciful to those who are old. Ya razik al-tifl al-saghir, or one who feeds even the little infant. Ya Allah, you do not leave them. You always feed them too. Ya man la yahtajul tafsir, or one who does not need any elucidation or tafsir. Salli ala Muhammad wa ali, the Imam taught him. And then Imam himself came out to the battlefield. You know what he does? Look at his complete submission to Allah. He turns to the skies and he says, Ya Allah, you know that everything that I had, everything that I've sacrificed is because of my love for you. On this day, when my friends are no more, when my enemies are rejoicing, I turn to you only, O my Lord, because you are the only person, the only being who can comfort me. You are the only one that I can complain to. And as the poet said, that the Imam said, that and his final words were, In kana dinu Muhammadin lam yastaqir illa biqatli. فَيَا سُيُوفُ خُذِينِ. If the religion of Muhammad cannot be saved except by my being killed, then all swords come and get me. لا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين سيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. Ya Allah, for the majlis, for all the marhumin from whom this majlis has been arranged. Ya Allah, forgive them their sins. Ya Allah, grant them the closest place with your ma'asumin in Jannah.
Now I'd like to call Brother Hassan Versi for 1 minute at the podium, please.
For those who are in difficulties, Ya Allah, relieve them their suffering. Ameen, Ya Rabbal Alamin.